Karyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Carey. So excited to be with you.
Yeah, we've been waiting on this one a while, haven't we? Rescheduled.
I think, what is this, number 3, the third time?
I think so. Yeah. Travel, pandemic, illness, it all gets in the way.
Yes.
But here we are. And thanks for joining me I don't do a lot of these in my home studio, but here we are.
Here we are.
Because you're a neighbor.
Because now we are a neighbor, which is just so awesome.
Yeah, but an hour away.
An hour away, yes.
Which is awesome. So I want to start at the beginning because you, as we got to know each other, you've talked a lot about your childhood. You have a great relationship with your mom and dad, which isn't always automatic. And your dad was a pastor, right? And you're a PK who turned out okay, which is really interesting, right? Yeah. Talk about how your childhood shaped you.
So I tell anybody who is, from the pastoral kind of world, the church world, that I'm one of those rare cases that I actually loved being a pastor's kid. And that you don't hear that very often. And I think what made the difference, a couple of things. My parents are salt of the earth kind of people, and they have a very healthy spirituality. And I think one of the best things that they did is they really set very clear boundaries between, I remember my dad, he just, as a pastor, when he would get hired by a church, one of the first things he would tell his board is, my family is not hired for this job. I'm hired for the job. So and he would make that very clear right from the very beginning. And so because of that, I remember being very small and him saying, you're my daughter, you're my son, I'm one of 3 kids. And he would say, you're allowed to make mistakes. And the church might judge you because but we're not going to. And I remember being
pretty awesome dad.
And so they had a very healthy spirituality. They also encouraged questions. They encouraged open dialogue. They knew about how to set boundaries between work and home. And so I think because of that, I was able to really kind of grow in my faith. And I didn't, in fact, okay, so this is interesting, Carey. I didn't even know what a PK was. This is going to blow your mind, until I was 15. And I was at a camp and somebody heard that my dad was a pastor. They're like, oh, you're a PK. And I'm like, what's a PK? And because when my dad would get hired, he said, my children are not allowed to be called PKs. So I actually did not even know what a PK was until from another person when I was a teenager. So it was very much of this and you know what? It's very interesting because it's almost prepared me for the work that I do now. Because, when I work with a lot of high performers, almost celebrity status, very high profile family leaders, I'm like, you've got to take your kids off the pedestal. Like this is your role, not theirs. And so in many ways, it's actually really prepared me for the work that I do now.
Without telling tales out of school, did you have a sibling who really pushed the boundaries to the point where your parents would be like, oh gosh, I wish we hadn't given them this much permission?
If of the 3 of us, I would probably be the one that pushed them the most. Yeah, not the other 2. I'm the youngest of the 3, but I would probably be definitely the one that pushed them the most. But they still had this just really solid, I keep kind of saying the healthy spirituality, those healthy boundaries, which it makes all the difference for children to know that they are loved no matter what.
Which is interesting because I think you come from a fairly conservative background theologically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fellowship Baptist.
Yeah. That's a rare combination.
Yes.
In that circle, right?
Yeah.
It
very
really
rare.
is.
Yeah. And not only Fellowship Baptist, but it was really interesting. My dad was also one of the, his faith was very much around women in leadership. He was always really encouraging my mom actually to become a pastor within the Fellowship Baptist. I went to seminary. I think you know that, right? Yeah. So when I was in seminary, he was kind of still playing. Karyn, are you sure? Are you sure? I'm like, Dad, that's not my calling. And he was good with that. But I think he would have loved.
He would have loved to have seen
He would have loved for me to be a pastor without question. But I knew my calling was a little different.
Well, you kind of are, right? Just very different.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Route. So when you were 13, at age 13, you got a diagnosis where you were told you'd be lucky to graduate high school.
Yes.
Went on not only go to seminary, but to get your doctorate and to practice, et cetera, et cetera. What happened? And what happened to you when you heard that?
So I talk about this in my TED Talk. This was also one of those incredible moments, not only for me in my own leadership development, but also in where my parents come. Because whenever I coach any kind of leader, at work or home, it's so important in terms of there's so many incredible principles in this story. So I was 13. So I come from a very academic family. My dad did his doctoral from Princeton. My grandmother was one of the first female doctors in Germany in the 1940s, and she lived with us. So she was almost like a second mother to me. Okay. My brother and sister, straight A students, both highly gifted. So along I come as the third child, struggling in school. My parents could see how hard I was trying. Like I was disciplined. I would get, but my marks were totally not reflective. And so they knew there was a massive gap. So they sent me to this psychologist to get tested. And I'm in this room. I can still remember what the room looks like. I can still remember with where I was sitting. And I can still remember him pulling out, like it's like it happened yesterday. Huh. And he pulls it out. And I remember he leans forward and he basically says, we know what the problem is, and you've got a learning disability, and you're going to be lucky to finish high school. I remember just kind of sitting there, and it's like my whole world just kind of exploded. Oh. And I'm processing it. I mean, he might have been intellectually very bright. His EQ was extremely low. Sure, for him to tell any 13-year-old that kind of message. And I just felt completely hopeless. And so afterwards, and my parents were really upset that we had entrusted a professional, and how he told that news was devastating. So anyway, I remember the car ride home was very quiet. And then we got home and my dad said to me, this is where the whole kind of story starts in terms of his own just, healthy parenting. He basically said, Karyn, from this day forward, we will no longer ask to see your report card. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, because your report card is not reflective of your effort. And in this house, we care about your efforts. We don't care about so much of the results. So he said, on the day of report card, we're going to have one question, which is, did you try your absolute best? Because you can control that. You cannot control the outcome. And all of a sudden, Carey, as soon as he said that, I felt hope again, because I can control my effort. I could not control the result. And so, for any parent who has kids with anxiety, and this is a huge piece with anxiety, is when you get your kids to focus on things they cannot control, it's going to drive their anxiety. So when you can get kids to focus on what they can control, which is their effort, it reduces their anxiety. Control and anxiety they're like connected.
Interesting.
So when I coach as a professional counselor, one of the first things I get people to do is you separate what can you control versus what you can't control. And that's a huge piece to the puzzle with anxiety. There's a lot of variables to it, but one of the huge pieces to it is, so our entire culture, we focus on things we can't control instead of things we can control.
I got 1,000 synapses connecting in my brain right now.
So as soon as I was able to kind of realize, okay, I can control my effort. And so that was kind of the first step. So that was kind of in grade 8. So that was kind of, so he said, that in our house, we're going to focus on your effort. You can control that. Therefore, that is what we are going to hold you accountable to. And we will literally not even ask to see your report card. And that was in grade 8. Grade 9, this is where kind of like, for anybody listening who has a strong parented kid, pay attention, because I am that strong spirited kid. If my parents had parented me differently, I would not have had the success that I had, without question, because a strong spirit, you tell them to go right, they want to go left. You tell them to go up, they want to go down, right?
And that's your personality.
And that's my personality. So you have to parent strong spirited children differently. And what you have to do with a strong spirited kid is you have to help them awaken their own sense of direction, and then you partner with them. So in grade 9, so after I have this diagnosis, my dad said, honey, you really should think about asking the school for help. No. Well, we've got this diagnosis. I think it'd be really helpful if the school knew that you had this LD. No. I'm not interested. I don't want to get any outside help. And this is, as a parent, you have to walk beside your children. Because if they had said, no, we're going to call the school, if they had kind of taken control and kind of taken away my own personal sense of control, I would have completely rebelled. 100% I would have rebelled. But then my dad said to me, he goes, okay, this is your life, not our life. Your name's on that report card, not ours. So we will respect your decision, Karyn, even though we highly disagree with it.
And you were 14?
And I was 14. So I'm like, good. So I felt like I won this, right? So this, I felt like, okay, I won the debate, right? So I'm not in grade 9. And then this is where part of, it's so funny in the TED Talk,
Yeah.
I actually, when I rewatched the TED Talk, I actually thought they had cut out this part. And it turns out I actually forgot to tell this part of the story in the TED Talk. So the part that I forgot to tell in the story is that when I was in grade 9 and I had my very first exam, it was English. And in that English exam, my very first exam, I got 37% on my very first exam in high school. And that was my wake-up call when I was walking home and I'm so angry, and I'm angry at God, and I'm angry at my parents, and I'm angry at this. I'm just filled with anger. And then that is when I felt a very deep, deep, deep sense in terms of what I really, like, God was kind of speaking to me around, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on this instead of focusing on this.
Mm.
You can't control this. You can control this. So what are you focusing on, Karyn? And it was this very deep, deep connection where I realized I'm focusing on the wrong thing. So I ran home and I sat down on my floor and I started focusing on things I can control. And that was my huge wake up. So I'm 14 years old. And that's when I literally put a little strategy in place for myself. And the entire plan was focused on things I could control. And that's when I realized I need to go and get help. And that for me, and for any leadership, when I think about leadership development, like that is one of the foundational things, is learning how to put your hand up and say, I'm struggling here. And once I was able to get help and put my hand up for help, all of a sudden the help was all around and I could actually start closing those gaps. And so I ended up graduating with honors, but man, did I have to work like 10 times harder than anybody else. But I was going for extra help after school, I had, lots and lots of help with the teachers. The teachers love me because I'm like, I want to do well. I'm not understanding this. I learned I'm a very high visual and kinesthetic student, which has helped me as a coach because I realized that I know how to engage a group. I know how I have to kind of speak and teach in different ways so I can really kind of get their full engagement. And so that's what helped me. Eventually I went to University of Waterloo, which was amazing, but I was working, I was studying 4 times harder than any of my friends at Waterloo, like without question, because I would learn something and I had to almost reteach it to myself. Now I know what I need to do when I study something, but I understand for any child who has a learning disability, I know what that feels like. And I know how alienated it's like. Our system is designed for auditory students, not visual and kinesthetic students.
So that's the source of the learning disability,
that is
auditory.
Part of it. It's called auditory. It's the way I process auditory. So it's a special way, and and I know how to. But it's been a gift. Like honestly, like now I see my learning disability as like this best gift. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it because now I understand when I'm speaking to whether it's, CEOs or teenagers, I know how you have to teach in a different way to try to get that level of engagement. And it's making sure you're teaching to all 3 auditory types or all 3 learning types.
So this is, I'm total amateur psychologist. So just throw this stuff out as I share it with you. But I have heard a number of people say, like, there seems, and you work with CEOs and top tier leaders every day. So whether that's experience or research you've got in your background, feel free to disagree. But it seems to me a disproportionate number of CEOs or senior leaders have some kind of learning disability, whether it's dyslexia.
Right.
My oldest son has diagnosed me unofficially as ADD.
Yes.
He may be correct.
Yeah.
I got 27% in grade 12 chemistry. I dropped math by the 10th grade. Right. Because I just couldn't do it. Right. And I got into university by the skin of my teeth. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is fun. And it took off for me. And I spent 11 years there, right, with the different degrees. But I'm wondering, do you see that as a profile of senior leaders that
Absolutely.
A lot struggle?
Oh, yeah. It's actually hilarious because when I draft anything in an email, I know how many lines I have to make it. Otherwise, if it's too long, they won't read it.
Oh, yeah. That's my staff. Like my longtime assistant, Sarah, she would like bold things, put it in yellow and like, you must read this in all caps. And then she would ask me, did you read this? I'm like, I don't think I did. Yeah.
You got 5 lines, everybody. You got 5 lines to try to capture the person's attention, right? It is, but they have like their own genius they have their own genius in this one area. And what's beautiful about all the CEOs I coach is that they just outsource. Like they know what they're really good at. And they stay in that lane and everything else gets delegated to.
You know what? It's so funny. I have this memory, and we're going to talk about the chairs. So maybe it's like, Carey, you've got serious work to do. Okay. Yeah. But I have this memory of, I know exactly where I was. I was probably in 6th grade. So I'm 11, 12 years old, and I'm not very good at math. And I remember someone saying, well, you better get good at math. You're going to need it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hire that out.
Right.
Now what causes an 11-year-old to think you're going to hire someone to do your math? Now that's how it turned out.
Right.
Being, it's like, well, we'll get someone to run finance. We'll get someone. I understand a spreadsheet. I know what solvency is, but like, don't ask me to get there.
Right.
So one of the theories, and this is where this question was going, is that, if we were all growing up now, we would all be medicated, treated, whatever. And there's an argument I've heard that seems semi-persuasive to me that says that might be a mistake, that sometimes that could be your genius. Like, look at what happened when your dad said, all right, this is your life.
Yes.
We strongly disagree. That moved the locus of control to you.
Completely.
I'm not asking you to say never prescribe drugs or anything like that, but what do you think about, how do your weaknesses become strengths? And do you have to be careful to keep those weaknesses sometimes near you? You know what I'm saying? It's a bad question, but you can redeem it.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started my counseling practice at 22 years old, I was at a medical center, and this kind of came up a lot. And so when people, for example, had anxiety, depression, first, who's the first person they go to? They go see their family doctor. And there was 200 doctors in this building. And when there was word on the street, there's this new counselor that loves young people, and I love young people, my practice exploded. So that's kind of where I started my career journey. But I learned very quickly working with these physicians, just the different philosophies around medication. And what I learned is that there are so many things that people can do. When we talk about the realm of control, okay, there are so many things that people can do without medication. Okay, so there's no question, there's some people that need it. And I'm always very clear about that.
Sure.
There's a ton of people that don't need it. But they need to focus on the right things. So things like, how, our mindset, I'm huge onto mindset, right? The power of the mind and the attitude that, in terms of the thoughts that we tell ourselves, learning how to master healthy thinking, learning how to master a really healthy schedule around sleep and nutrition, and how that affects our ability to, in terms of how it affects our thinking, but also our emotions. There's so many things that we can do on the education side. And so what I loved with the doctors, certainly that I worked with, their whole philosophy is go see Karyn first, learn tools. And if that doesn't work, then come back and we will give you medication. So, so it was a second resort. It wasn't a first resort. And I felt like that was a really healthy way of looking at this, because otherwise it's very quick around everybody thinks that they have to get medicated. For sure. If I had gone, probably somebody would have put me on something, but I didn't need it. In my case, that doesn't mean that other people don't need it. So I think you have to just make sure you get a really, really good feedback.
It's an interesting metaphor, second choice, not first choice.
Yeah. And that was from the family doctors. That was from the family doctors themselves. And, it's, again, we could have a whole conversation with lots of other family doctors, but certainly the doctors I have really enjoyed working with and collaborating with, that has been their philosophy, is that focus first on what you can control, that locus of control, really master that set of toolbox. And then we're going to work on the physical things that you cannot control. Right. And so it's kind of, again, separating those two different things.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Karyn. There are personality types, and mine, if you look at the Enneagram, I'm an 8. So basically control. I have relatively low anxiety, I think, compared to a lot of people I know, a lot of other leaders. I just don't worry. Sometimes it makes people upset.
Right.
It's like, you should worry. And, if it's nuclear war, I'm probably going to worry a little bit, but it's just generally not a thing. How is anxiety related to locus of control?
It is, I call them besties.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they're besties. There's certain things that are very interconnected. Anxiety is very connected to both perfectionism.
Okay.
And also control. So and also self-esteem. So I'd actually call them like they're 4 besties all kind of hang out. And the reason is because with a lot of people with anxiety, so let me just back up. So, right now what we're seeing and hearing is everyone's like, I got anxiety. Everyone's talking about anxiety, right? So I work part-time at City Line as a leadership relationship expert. I think you know that. And so we did the show on this. It was actually one of the most widely used
TV show, by the way.
TV show. Yes, sorry.
For the American audience.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. It's syndicated in the U.S. all across
the U.S.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Syndicated all across the U.S. actually. But yes, it's a TV show that I do. I'm their leadership and relationship resident expert. And so we did a show on anxiety. It was one of the most well reviewed episodes, because I explained what is anxiety? And this is part of what I do is just education. It's just helping people understand these building blocks.
Right.
And so anxiety is just an emotion. That's it. That's it. It's one word. And we've got thousands of them, Carey. Most people think we have about 50. Actually, I love it when I speak and I'll say, how many feelings do we have? And sometimes people will be like 20 or 3. Right. Yeah, no, we've got thousands. Okay, we've got thousands. So feelings, that's all anxiety is a feeling, is how I feel. Anxious, happy, joyful, perplexed, tired, exhausted, excited. I mean, what was that? 8, 9?
Yeah.
Okay, so feelings you cannot control. Thoughts you can. So this is kind of a little psychoeducation, everybody. So what it is our thoughts drive how we feel. Our feelings drive our behavior. So thoughts drive feelings, drive behavior. So when people feel anxious, it's just how they feel. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's not negative or positive. It's what we call neutral. It's kind of, it might be pleasant or unpleasant. Okay. So, but anxiety is just a feeling. And so when I coach clients, whether it's a Fortune 500 CEO or a teenager, it doesn't make any difference. I get them to pay attention to how are you feeling, but then let's kind of go back and connect what's the thought that's driving it. Because for a lot of people, the thought is what if. For anxiety, it's what if. What if I don't get this promotion? What if I don't have this amount of net worth? What if I don't get into this college? What if? Where's their focus? It's on the future, which they cannot control.
Wow, this is good.
Okay, so that's the problem, not the anxiety. The anxiety is not the bad guy. In fact, your anxiety is your friend. I tell everybody, your anxiety is your friend. They're like, well, Karyn, it doesn't feel like my friend. I know it doesn't feel like your friend, but it's trying to tell you something. So you got to pause and you got to understand what is the thought that's driving my anxiety. And then you've got to challenge your thought. You've got to really kind of be, and so that's why, in leadership, it all comes down to really being very mindful on what are the thoughts that I tell myself. And are they empowering? Are they truthful? Or are they toxic? Because for a lot of people, their thoughts are toxic. That's the problem, not the anxiety.
So this is fascinating because if you had asked me ahead of time, okay, Carey, what comes first, the feeling or the thought? Right. I would say the feeling does.
Yeah, and most people would think,
really?
Yeah. And this is the kind of education we need to get into the schools.
Okay.
Well,
and you're helping me connect the dots as to why I'm probably not an anxious person.
Okay.
Is when I get anxiety, like and you want to make me anxious?
Yeah.
Show me something that's going down to the left, not up and to the right. Okay. So if we're losing momentum, if we're losing this, that's when I freak out a little bit. And then what do? I go right back into control. It's like, all right, let's diagnose the issue. Let's look at this.
Yeah.
Let's get this fixed.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody on board? Okay. Starting now, we're going to do this and let's see if it causes whatever. Right. And then, I often, because the news has been very concerning, it's like, okay, well, what can I really do about it? Not much on this one. Then I'm not going to think about it, right? I'm not going to play that Fox News, CNN tape over and over and over again in my head and try to get better sources. So that is a recipe for anxiety or? No,
that is what they call a solution to anxiety, which is, so you recognize the anxiety. Okay, I'm feeling anxious because I think, so the thought is what, Carey? So the thought was, so you pay attention to the feeling. This is what everybody can do at home. So you pay attention with what you feel. And by the way, feelings are only one word. That's one of the tricks of knowing what a feeling, because a lot of people can't even differentiate between what a thought and feeling is.
Oh, wow.
Okay, actually, here's a fun question. I know a little bit of a sidebar, but let's come back. How would you, let's say I just come to the US, I don't speak English, and I hear the word thought and I hear the word feeling. How would you differentiate those two for me?
Oh, a thought is an intentionally, again, English is a second language. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, an intentionally formed idea or series of ideas that you consider.
Yeah.
A feeling is often a subconscious mood that you experience.
Okay.
No?
Okay. Not bad. Okay. Okay. So let me help to differentiate, because this is, again, back to the education that we're talking about. It all comes back to education. This is why I love this topic so much. So thoughts you can control, feelings you can't control. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Feelings are one word. Thoughts are generally a sentence. So let me give you an example. I feel as though you're not a good podcaster. Is that a thought or a feeling?
That is a thought.
Correct. A lot of people get that one wrong. So why is it a thought? You're right. Because I said, I feel as though. Right. So,
well, you made an assessment. You made an independent judgment about my ability as a podcaster. Right. So that would be a thought.
Correct. And it's actually, and this is really important. I talk about this in my book. I have a little grid, a little chart for people to really kind of differentiate this because it's really important. It's actually really bad English, and a lot of us talk this way. We throw the word feel in it and say, well,
I feel like you're not listening to me.
Right. Well, don't challenge me on that because that's how I feel. And then the other person's like, what do I do? And they feel kind of powerless. Right. So when we're talking when we talk about communication, when we talk about great leadership and all great leaders, you've got to really separate what's a thought, what's a feeling, because you can challenge thoughts. You do not challenge feelings.
Right. A feeling might be, I feel unsafe.
I feel sick. Right. And so the little secret with a feeling is feelings are one word: happy, sad, nervous, anxious, exhausted, perplexed. So you validate the feeling while you can challenge the thought.
That's really good. And you can do that for yourself.
Correct.
And that brings the locus of control back to you.
Correct. And so back to the anxiety. So one of the first things, so what you did, which was very cool, is that you would understand, okay, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, so you kind of go back to the thought. I feel anxious because I think what? I think we're losing momentum. So the thought is, I think we're losing momentum. Therefore, you feel anxious. So what did you do? You created a plan based on that thought because that thought actually is probably truthful. That's real data, right? So then what you did is you created a plan based on that data. And that's why plans are one of the best ways to actually reduce anxiety.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So when we talk about change management in companies, I was just in Alabama this past week working with a senior team on all the change that's going on. One of the best things as a leader you can do is pay attention, validate. I sense the anxiety. You pay attention, you validate it. Let's talk about the plan. Plans reduce anxiety. So that's why control, anxiety is the sense that I'm losing control for a lot of people. And so you have to kind of focus on what they can control.
How did you end up here doing this? I'd love to go back a little bit because, first of all, that was incredible. Secondly, it's not natural that somebody who struggled in school would, number one, graduate high school, but then go on to higher education and now train people in these things. Give us the thumbnail of the journey.
So thumbnail of the journey is in high school, I was debating with what to do. It was either interior design or psychology. So
very natural.
I was kind of like, I was a flip of a coin, but I thought I can do design for fun. I really wanted to help. So that was kind of, that's where I started off at Waterloo University with my undergrad in psychology. And so eventually would do my doctorate in marriage and family. And so when I graduated with my master's, I was 22 years old. And which was really exciting. Then a family doctor asked me to start up a counseling practice within his medical center. I had no idea at the time, being a very early, first year entrepreneur, of how huge that would be, because I had these 200 doctors in the hometown just exploded. My practice exploded. Within 2 years, I was at full capacity. And then I just felt like I love young people. Anybody who has teenagers, I love young people. They're curious. They got a lot of questions. Things have to make sense to them. And I felt a real connection. I loved them. They loved me. It was a mutual thing. I was super young. So from that, then I started writing books. I was encouraged to do television. One of my clients said, you should get into TV. I thought, why not? When you have no fear of failure, it's kind of cool because it doesn't, if I fail, like I've failed so much. This is a cool thing about having an LD. You fail a lot. Okay. There's a lot of things so you kind of get used to not fearing it. It's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not going to happen. So I thought I'm going to produce a TV show. So literally got a TV show up and going when I was 24 years old.
Which one was that?
It was called Spill Your Guts. I managed to recruit. I kind of go back. I can't believe I pulled this off, but I got all the 5 big record labels in the country to agree to this music talk show, and they would give me access to their celebrity musicians, and I would sit down with them and interview them about topics important to teenagers. So we talked about goal setting and depression and anxiety and family relationships, and it was an amazing show. We sold it across Canada, the US, and into Singapore. I was 25 years old.
And you're hosting this.
And I'm hosting this.
Spill Your Guts.
Spill Your Guts. So that was kind of my...
And who are you talking to?
I was talking to, the show was really focused on teenagers and parents.
Yeah, but who are the celebrities that you're talking to who are spilling their guts.
I actually had an opportunity to interview Britney Spears, and I turned it down. I turned it down because I had just run out of talking. Yeah, I had just run out of production money, and we were producing it. I had a production company that I was partnered with. So, so it was just an amazing journey to kind of sit down with these very high profile musicians and just kind of hear them very, very raw, right? In terms of, and just not your typical questions. So it was a little bit of a Much Music MTV style. So anyway, so that's where it kind of started. And then, so I kind of like focused on teenagers for the first kind of 10 years. And then by this time I was speaking across Canada. And I had these amazing companies. Pepsi was one of my big sponsors, Pizza. And because I'd started developing these corporate relationships, I developed relationships with all these CEOs. That's kind of how I started. And then, so what happened with the transition with how it kind of ended into more of the corporate culture was I started having these conversations with these CEOs going, Karyn, you specialize with teenagers, right? I said, yes. They're like, well, we're now hiring teenagers. You know, a variety of CEOs that I was talking to were saying this, and we don't know how to manage them. So could you take your doctoral training? At this time, I had my doctorate in family systems and in marriage and family. Could you transfer that into the workplace? I thought, it's interesting. And I thought, could I do that? Well, why not? Why not, Carey? I said to myself, why not? Worst thing's going to happen is that it's not going to happen. So I thought, I'll transfer. So that's what I did 15 years ago. And I found it was really easy, actually. So now we work with companies all around the world. I think we're working with 7 different countries, every single industry. I started focusing first on managing millennials because that was kind of my entry point. And then what I realized is when I would work with these managers and I could understand why were some managers having a really tough time on engagement and retention, and why were millennials quitting? Because you have to manage millennials very differently. And so I realized that the secret sauce of really successful managers and great leaders was on emotional intelligence. And that's when I actually started kind of really going deep on, okay, I want to understand emotional intelligence. And when I realized that you can learn emotional intelligence, locus of control. And wow, you just have to have somebody really, really willing to do it. That's when I got very excited. And that's when I just went really deep on the topic. And so now that's what I do 80% of the time.
So let's talk about learning how not to fear failure.
Yes.
Because I talk to leaders all the time. They're terrified of failure. How did you, and I think this ties into your entrepreneurial streak, which I don't want to overlook. I want to talk about buying your first house.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You've told me that story before, and that's a fascinating story. But how did someone who was told she was going to fail overcome her fear of failure?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I failed. Okay. So again, this is more of it for everybody who's a parent. Let your kids fail.
What does that mean?
You let them literally fail a test. You let them fail a course. You don't rescue them. You don't kind of try to go rescue them. Let them experience the cost of their failure, assuming that this is not life-threatening. Okay.
Right.
The second you're in life-threatening, then the rules change. Okay. But so you let your kids fail, because this is part of parenting a strong-spirited kid, is that if my parents had rescued me from failing, I wouldn't have learned that lesson. Because when I failed, I realized 2 things. One, I need to learn how to ask for help because I was very stubborn. And so all of a sudden I saw the value of learning and asking for help, which is such a critical piece of leadership. And the other real thing I realized is that I am not defined by my failure. Okay. So when I realized, okay, I have failed this test, but that does not mean I am a failure. So you separate your fail. So this is the part of why so many people are afraid of failure, is because their self-worth is attached to it. So you've got to separate it. It's like, and this is what my TED Talk is about, is we have to separate our self-worth from goals. It's like, this is something that I want, but this doesn't define me. So goals, whether or not we get them, we don't get them, we're going to be disappointed or we're going to be excited, but they don't define us. And so the failure is we've just got to start seeing as feedback and data. And so, and again, that was where my parents really were very helpful, when I was really able to experience that, really seeing my disability is, this doesn't define who you are. This is just how you learn. Okay. So you're learning how to separate those 2 things. And then what happens is when children really have that sense of security, of that self-worth, is like, their self-worth is solid. It's like a solid foundation, that middle chair from my TED Talk. When you feel that, then all of a sudden you become more fearless. It's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen is not going to happen. And so I learned that for me, what I didn't want to do is live my life in regret. I didn't want to be 80 years old saying, I wish I had done ABC. I would rather have failed. I would rather experience failure than regret in my own brain. Like I almost weighed the different value systems.
Yeah. The other thing I want to chase down is you have become an entrepreneur, a real entrepreneur, because, a lot of clinical psychologists, they just kind of have their practice. They do what they do. They do their 3 decades or whatever, and then they're done. But you've been entrepreneurial. Where did that start? And how did that emerge?
So it started when I was 12, when I was actually selling raspberries and strawberries door to door in my little wagon. I would go and pick them up fresh in the morning, and then I put them on my little wagon and went door to door. And I mean, who's not going to buy fresh raspberries and strawberries if a 12-year-old girl comes to your front door, right? So I would sell it really fast. So that's when I realized I love the sense of that I could have an idea and I could kind of go make it happen. So I think that's when it kind of got started. And then I think when I just knew that I wanted to have control over my schedule and what kind of work I do and who I kind of work with. And so one of the things, we have a career course, one of the things that we teach, one of our many courses, and it's one of the actually exercises I get both teenagers and adults pivoting to do, which is identify your values with what you want in your career. And for me, I realized I wanted meaningful work. I wanted something artistic, definitely making a difference, and having something about entrepreneurship. And so starting my counseling practice at 22 was a good start. And then just being open to new opportunities and seeing where the needs were. That was huge as an entrepreneur. And then, so I did that, being an entrepreneur for 25 years. I just got nominated the second year as a nominee for Canadian Women's Entrepreneur Award, which is great. But the one thing that I got myself, because all my training is in psychology and counseling, was I got myself a really rock star business mentor.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And that was a game changer. That was a big game changer because I knew I knew I needed business training and I needed somebody who understood business culture.
So how did that happen?
So that happened because I was hired. It was a very funny story. I was actually hired to go to this mentoring conference, and I forget, some television station hired me to interview the speakers at this mentoring conference. And I'm backstage, and I'm not really paying very much attention. But this woman went up on the stage, and she starts giving this very dramatic keynote, and she starts pointing to everybody in the audience. She's like, "You need a mentor. You need a mentor. You need a mentor." And then she's like, everybody think about it. Who's the first person you can think of that, who could be your mentor? And I thought right away of this gentleman that I knew, that I met in a marketing conference. And she's like, I want everybody to go home, pick up the phone, not an email, pick up the phone and you ask that person. So I asked him, his name is Tony Chapman. And Tony was my mentor for a decade. And it was a game changer, extremely well-respected marketing guru here in Canada. And he was an exceptional, and now it's kind of morphed into this beautiful friendship. But he taught me so much around business and marketing and just understanding kind of corporate needs and culture. So that's what kind of, when I was kind of starting to move in more the business side in organizations, that's where the mentoring piece is huge.
So let's talk about your book, The 3 Chairs. It just came out, Wall Street Journal bestseller, incredible, and gave birth to a TED Talk, which we're going to talk about. But for those of you who are watching, what are the 3 chairs? And it's such a simple but powerful illustration.
Mm-hmm. So the 3 chairs are basically, and I talk about this in the TED Talk for more information about it, but basically it's the 3 different attitudes that we all have. It was a way for me to, and this is my learning disability actually at work, because I was able to kind of, when I actually started working with young people and realizing that a lot of people struggle with self-esteem, I basically started going into the weeds with the research. And there's so much research that's out there. Mm-hmm. But where we're missing where the gap is simplifying the research for the average person and really making sure that it's practical. And so when I realized the amount of research that was done on confidence and attitudes and how that affects literally every decision we can make, I thought, how do I take all this huge amount of information and boil it down to something that's very simple to understand? And that was my LD kind of at work. Mm-hmm. And so this book really is very much, this is the gift of my learning disability, because I realized it had to be visual It had to be super simple and it had to be very practical. And so there's 3 different chairs. And so maybe we can just hold it up for a sec.
Yeah, sure.
Just so that I can kind of show everybody. So the left chair is what I call the insecure person, or basically the insecure attitude. This is the person that kind of puts themselves down. The right chair is what I call it's basically arrogant, the arrogant leader. They kind of put down everybody else. We all probably know somebody kind of like that. And then you've got the middle chair, and the middle chair person is somebody who is very confident. But the key difference between confident and arrogant is humility. This is the person in the middle chair saying, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. I'm going to put my hand up and ask for help. And so this is where so we talk about the confidence, and not only the confidence, the attitude, but when somebody has that attitude, how it literally impacts every single decision in their life, from goal setting to who they choose to marry, to their friendships, to in terms of perfectionism, it's all interconnected based on these 3 chairs.
Okay, so let's paint the profile, because this is really interesting, so people can see themselves.
Okay.
The left chair, the right chair, the middle chair.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's start with the left chair. What would you say? Unconfident, insecure person?
Yes. Yeah. This is imposter syndrome. So you can have, so this has nothing to do with age. And by the way, the youngest I've done this is 5-year-olds. I've done this 3 chairs to kindergarten students, and kindergarten children can see themselves very quickly when I kind of explain it. And then I've done it to Fortune 500 CEOs. It's crazy in how it's for every age group. And so I want everybody to think at home or wherever you're listening at work to think about which chair you're sitting in the majority of the time. So the person in the left-hand chair, they put themselves down. They have a very toxic mindset. I'm okay if I achieve. Okay. I'm only okay if I'm not enough. So their thought pattern is very tough on themselves. They're very critical towards themselves. Okay. The right chair, the arrogance, that's person who is very tough on other people. So they are very critical towards others. But what's interesting is that this is often the cover up for the right chair or the left chair, right? So do not be fooled when you see arrogance. It's usually a big cover up. It's like them just taking the mask off.
Well, I've read that narcissists are basically insecure.
Oh, it is. And I've worked with lots, I've been doing this for 25 years. It's amazing of how many people can seem so arrogant. They get in my office, the mask comes off, and then you really see with what's going on. So do not be fooled when you see that kind of arrogance. And then the person in the middle chair is they have a sense of confidence of who they are. They know their self-worth. It's not based on achievement. It's like, I'm okay, period, end of story. And so because of that, they're more likely to take risks. They're more likely to set goals and go after them. They're more likely to ask for help. They're more likely to choose partners sitting in the middle chair. They have a better sense of setting boundaries for themselves. Like you can literally, once you kind of know where somebody sits, you can actually make very strong, educated guesses on how they make decisions. Like I had people read the book and they'll actually kind of get freaked out because they're like, okay, it's because the first couple of chapters is all around understanding the chairs. And then once they're like, okay, I see myself sitting in the left chair, then they start reading the book and it's like they're reading their life.
So how does the person in the right chair or the left chair, the insecure person, make decisions? Okay,
so which topic do you want? About relationships?
Yeah, relationships.
Okay, so the left chair is often attracted to, what's your guess, Carey?
Probably similar people.
Correct. So the left chair is often attracted also to the left chair or the right chair.
Wow. So they want someone to dominate them?
Because what happens is we are unconsciously attracted, all based on research, to people who think the same way we do. Okay. So if I put myself down, the middle chair person, what are they going to do? They're going to try to lift me up. Doesn't match my thinking. So I'm going to discount it. You're just saying that. You're just supposed to say that. You're my mom, my dad. You're my boss. So they will discount anything that's positive. The right chair, they will put them down so it matches their thinking. And the right chair.
I think I'm worthless. Yes, you're worthless.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And so that's why these two are often attracted to each other for friendships, for marriage partners, for relationships, and also business partners. So I can think about, hundreds of stories. So all parents listening, just ask yourself, okay, so this is when a lot of people are like, oh my goodness. Like when I do this in live conferences, Carey, it's crazy. People will literally blurt out, crap. Oh my goodness. I can see myself. I can see I got a lot of relationships when I
access this material going through my head.
Right. I mean, it's, I was speaking at a parenting conference in New York. This is several years ago. And after I finished about the 3 chairs, one of the moms, she's like, where are you going? I said, well, I've got to go back to Toronto. She goes, can I drive you? My limo's downstairs. I want to take you for a drive in my limo because I got to pick your brain because this thing is like blowing my mind. And in the limo, she starts sharing with me about how she saw her whole life flash before her. She could kind of understand the decisions she made, why she was attracted to certain people. And this is what happens. Like when people see it, it's actually crazy. When I kind of teach it, I can watch the body language and people's eyes are just like, they can start seeing. So that's just one topic.
Okay.
So that's one.
So let's talk about the arrogant guy over here.
Okay. So the arrogant guy is deeply, for the most part, or a female, because you can see this, right? For the most part, it's a big cover up for this. So learning how to, you might have a boss who is sitting in that right chair. You might have a partner that's sitting in that right chair. And so for people who are like learning to sit in the middle chair, learning how to relate to people in the right chair is a really interesting thing. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I access the material in the book and in your TED Talk, I'm like, nobody wants to admit this, but it's a coping mechanism. I'm probably in this chair.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
You don't think so? Eh?
No, I wouldn't have thought that. Okay.
Naturally. Like I'm hopefully learning to sit in the middle chair.
Yeah.
But I think that when I look back, because there was insecurity definitely that I had to work through, but it would usually come across as bravado. It would usually come across as control.
Right.
You can't touch me, or I'm differentiating myself. I've been talking about this with a friend over the last year, really good friend who you would say, oh, he sits in the middle chair. But it's like, I look down on people more than I should.
Really?
Being
that
really
is
honest.
so okay. I'm so surprised.
Interior.
Yeah.
What chair would you have imagined?
I would have for sure said this.
Middle chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody's born in the middle chair, are they?
Well, nobody's born in any of the chairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Nobody's born in any. We learn all of it. I'm hoping I sit here. Yeah.
But if I'm not in the middle,
yeah,
I gravitate here.
Okay. So as a family, my husband and I were just talking about this, and we were actually, because for Mother's Day, like all moms, I had everybody, my boys, I had them watch my TED Talk and we did the discussion questions. I'm like, that's all I want. As a mom, that's all I want. And so we had this amazing conversation about exactly this point, which was, I think what happens is, first of all, we all learn where to sit.
Yeah.
But we also, if under stress, we tend to kind of go to one chair.
And I think that's it. If you push my buttons, I'm in this chair, not that chair.
Okay.
Because I don't wallow in self-pity.
Okay.
Well, I do once in a while, give myself 10 minutes a year to wallow in self-pity.
Okay.
But it would tend to be like just a power up.
Yeah.
Let's get through it. Yeah. I'll boss some people around and feel better.
Okay.
Rather than I'm going to sit in the corner and cry.
Okay.
But hopefully I'm living most of my time, certainly as a result of my faith, in the middle chair.
Right.
Which is your natural chair? So
I definitely would have, growing up, and certainly with my LD, was sitting there for sure. And then it was like my journey, my leadership journey is learning how to sit in the middle chair. Mm-hmm. And by the way, nobody sits in any chair 100% of the time.
Well, I was going to say, that's why I don't want to say, I'm so middle chair.
Yes.
That's my arrogance.
Exactly. And so what I'd say is, which chair do you see yourself sitting in the majority of the time? Okay. And I'd say like 80%. If I think of somebody who is a healthy confidence, they would see themselves sitting here about 70 to 80% of the time.
I would say 70 to 80% of the time I'm probably in the middle.
Okay.
But push my buttons or lack of sleep or whatever, I'll end up in the arrogant chair.
And that's good reflection, right? Mm-hmm. And I think so under stress, so that's the first question. Where do you see yourself sitting the majority of the time? Start thinking about how it affects your decision-making, whether it's setting boundaries, relationships, goal setting, perfectionism, all of that. And then think about under stress, which and one of the things actually one of my sons asked, which I thought was really interesting, is does it play out with introvert, extrovert? Which I thought was a very interesting, and I had to kind of process that because as an extrovert, extroverts are kind of like, they tend to lash out. Like, well, everything is external.
Correct.
So I don't know. I haven't kind of figured out my theory about that. I thought that was a really, really strong.
That's a great question.
Isn't that a great question?
Yeah.
So, but I think it is a good question for everybody to think about. Which chair you see yourself sitting the majority of the time? And under stress, when you haven't taken good care of yourself, which chair do you tend to kind of fall into?
So I answered the question based on natural or under stress.
Okay.
But I would say, I hope.
Yes, the majority of the time.
The majority of the time I'm in the middle?
Yes.
Would you?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I absolutely. I would say that. So it's
I'll take your clinical opinion. Thank you. I'm gonna accept that one.
Yeah. So I mean, and
but it's a huge journey, Karyn.
It's a huge
like
journey.
This is like years of therapy, years of prayer, years of self-awareness, years of self-regulation, years of learning have got me. And I was quiet. Like you said something, I think in your TED talk, you said, because a lot of people would say, no, you're definitely not on the arrogant side.
Right.
But sometimes that dialogue is inside my head.
Right.
It doesn't come out, but that counts, right?
Absolutely.
Because your self-talk could be like, whatever. Or your self-talk could be,
Right.
I'm a victim.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And so even if you say it quietly, like I said in my TED talk, even if you say it quietly, it still kind of counts as that chair, And I just remember everybody that it's, these are learned. We learn it from a variety of different sources. We learn it, but we can change it. Okay. This is not genetic. This is not, you can learn how to sit in the middle chair. Everybody can learn it. Okay. So I think this is where I really want to make sure that the power message of hope comes out very loud and clear, because especially when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about all these like heavy topics, people can learn. They can learn. I've done this for 25 years. I have never not been able to get a person in the middle chair.
So is that like, give us, and again, we're coming up on an hour. So
goodness, wow.
I know. Didn't it fly?
Wow,
we'll have to do a round two.
We have to do
we'll do a round two.
Okay.
I've gotten to 2 of my questions. So this is good.
Okay.
No, that's always a sign of a good interview. So give us a couple of hacks. If someone's like, I'm the victim and, I hate myself. Or if someone's like, I think I kind of am better than other people because their insecurity goes to bravado, if you can call it that.
Right.
What are some ways out of that other than 20 years of counseling, prayer, sweat, tears, mistakes, and there's a healthier way to live?
So the first thing is really dialing in around the mindset is I am enough. Like I can't emphasize that enough, because if people really just let it soak in, absorb it, think about it, like meditate on it, just really kind of understand I am enough, period. And I've had clients where they've, written it up on pieces of papers, they put it up on wall tattoos, they put it up on their computer screen. I am enough, period. Even the comments in right now with the TED Talk, people are like, I'm enough, period. Thank you for this. I needed to hear this. So that is the foundational piece, because once we understand that and we meditate on it, then everything else starts falling into place.
Yeah. So tie that into your Christian faith.
Yeah.
Because that could be woo-woo new age stuff where I am enough. And then, that whole idea that you wake up one night and you realize, actually, I'm not. This is a disaster.
Yeah.
Because I think that is somehow theological.
Well, I tell all my clients, whether or not they're atheist, agnostic, Christian, Jewish, I've got clients with all spectrum, right? All with all kinds of faith backgrounds, is all you have to do is think about, with your children. This is when somebody who's really stuck on it, all I have to do is tell them, would you tell your kids, I love you if you get an A? And they're like, no. I love you if you get your size 6? No. I said, that's true. Truth is truth. It doesn't change. Yeah. So, when you really start speaking truth to yourself, it's like this universal value system, Carey. I mean, it's very powerful. When you really get people to pause and start thinking about that internal dialogue and getting people to say, just think about what would you tell your child that you love? I would say, I love you, period. And once they're able to kind of so people that are stuck with this really toxic thought, you have to, and this is what I do as a coach, I have to get them to step outside of that themselves, because the dialogue is so loud and so strong. You have to get them to step outside.
Okay, that's a really good start. Yeah. What are some other things? Because I agree, Daniel Goleman probably broke that ground in the 90s. Emotional intelligence can be learned.
Yes.
What are some ways, if you're the arrogant or insecure leader, the imposter, to move into that middle chair?
So the middle chair mindset, the middle chair leader, they have developed. So again, knowing that they can do it is really critical. Just having kind of that mindset. I talk about 5 core skills of that middle chair leader, skills that they can actually focus on with what they can control. I call it the CARDS acronym. C stands for their communication, learning how to give honest and real feedback. A stands for their attitude and their goal setting. Goal setting is one of the best ways to learn how to sit in the middle chair, because you're focusing on the locus of control.
That's why.
That's why. So the thing about goal setting is you've got to be very careful because if the mindset is I'm going to get this goal and I'm okay if I get this goal, you're now putting yourself back in the left chair. The mindset has to be I'm okay, period. I want to get this goal because this is important to me. Then you're focusing on what you can control. So that's a really critical piece about the attitude. So that's the second. A stands for attitude, your attitude and your goal setting skills. Relationship skills is your next category, and that's your ability to focus on empathy and seeing life through a different lens. So that's where generational differences, personality differences really kind of fall into play. And a great leader, regardless of age, they really realize that how I see it is different than how you see it. So that's a third skill set. The fourth skill set is decision-making and self-discipline. So this is really interesting. Self-discipline is very correlated to sitting in the middle chair. And it's also very correlated with happiness. There's tons of research done about, incredible actually. I don't know anyone, Carey, who is sitting in the middle chair who has not mastered a very healthy dose of self-discipline. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is.
So self-discipline, which is really huge because when I started working with millennials, one of the biggest things that I started seeing is just this whole, we're living in a whole culture. This is all of us around instant gratification, right? So self-discipline is a cornerstone of learning how to sit in that middle chair. And the fifth category, S is for stress and emotion management. So that the leader who sits in the middle chair is learning how to set boundaries. It's learning how to say no. It's learning how to really take care of themselves in all parts of their life. And so learning how to sit in that middle chair is learning how to develop all 5 of those core, and these are skills that all of us can learn. Yeah.
Threading this back to where we started, anxiety.
Yes.
Most prevalent in the imposter chair, the arrogant chair, and how does it go in the middle chair?
So anxiety is very strong on the left and the right chair.
Both. Okay.
But it looks different. So on the left chair, the person is like, they're very, they're putting themselves down because of the anxiety. So they're going to, they're just going to get themselves all kind of tied up. Where I see it in the right chair is they tend to lash out at everybody else. Because of that anxiety, it comes out as aggression towards other people.
That's unhealthy me or old me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really critical. And so, but the person in the middle chair is getting them to focus, getting themselves, their family, their team at the office. Let's focus on what we can control and accept whatever our best is. We're going to strive for excellence, not perfection. So you can't erase. This is the other thing about our brain. You can't erase thoughts. You have to replace your thought. Okay. So learning how to really, so instead of saying to ourselves, I got to stop, I can't be a perfectionist. I can't be that's not going to go. You have to, your brain is so sophisticated. You have to, and I do this with when I was an executive coach, when I'm coaching clients, you have to replace whatever that toxic thought is with something that is so truthful and so powerful. And that's how you do it. And so you have to replace, you can't erase perfection. You've got to replace it with, I will strive for excellence, not perfection.
Not erase, replace.
Yes.
So good. Okay. Let's talk TED Talk. You just delivered one.
Yeah.
It's out. It's getting a lot of traction online. What was the process like?
Intense.
I know. We had to walk through it a little bit, right?
It's intense.
Yeah.
It was an amazing, my book came out, and then within a month I got requested to do the TED Talk, which was really exciting. I've always wanted to do one, but just had never, prioritized it. So it was perfect timing. But it was awesome. It is, I really see what I do as I'm a teacher. I'm really an educator. I love to take a lot of data and simplify it and make it so that people can understand it and make it practical, right? And so where the book is different than the TED Talk, the book is a business book. It's for leaders and developing leaders. The TED Talk, I intentionally widened the audience so that, parents could watch it with their children, right? Managers could watch it with their team, and teachers could watch it with their classroom. So we have free discussion questions for all 3 groups so that you can watch it together and then have a discussion, because it's then the reflection that's so powerful. And so it was an amazing process to go through it. For anybody who's done a TED Talk, you know what I'm talking about. You get assigned coaches and people you do tons of rehearsals. The biggest challenge for me was getting it down to 17 minutes. Like, this is an hour, right?
I know.
Right?
I know. It's your life's work.
But it's my life's work.
Yeah.
It's my life's work. And I'm just, My hope was that people would watch it made sense, and they would feel hopeful. And that's what I wanted. Because, we're just living in a culture that feels like there's no hope. It's like, I've got anxiety, I have no hope. I've got a mental illness, I've got no hope. I've got like bad parents or I wanted people watching going, okay, this is hope. This is a message of hope. And so I'm just I'm thrilled it's getting such good traction and that people are sharing it. They're watching in their classroom, in their team. And, CEOs are sitting down in their living room watching it with their teenagers. And that was my goal. Right? So that you can have that honest conversation. Everybody watching, watch it with your family, have that honest conversation, that this is a process. This is a journey. We're not, don't think, don't give this sense that, some of you've got it all figured out, having that kind of honesty, I think is just so powerful.
Well, this has been incredible. I think round one, we'll have to have you back, Karyn. It's been great. Also, your husband and boys are in the backyard along with your dogs, and everyone's hungry.
Well, full service. We get a barbecue after this.
We get a barbecue after this. And we made everybody hungry for it while we did this interview. But I want to thank you so much. I think you probably opened up the minds and hearts of a lot of leaders today. Love the angle on anxiety. The book is called The Three Chairs: How Great Leaders Drive Communications, Performance, and Engagement. And your TED Talk, does it have a title?
Why confidence is the secret to great leaders at work and at home.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so you can find that. It's Dr. Karyn Gordon, Karyn with a Y. Just search that on TED.com and you'll find it. It'll pop up. Karyn, if people want to learn more, what's a website where they can find you online?
The best is to go to our main one, which is DK. DK stands for Dr. Karyn Leadership.org.
Okay.
O-R-G.
DKleadership.org. Karyn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Carey.
Thanks for watching the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. So glad you tuned in. I hope it helps you thrive in life and leadership. And if you haven't checked it out yet, head on over to the Art of Leadership Academy. In that, I give you everything you need to lead, run, and grow a church. We'll see you next time.